G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. I thought it was probably time for a malt liquor video, so look what I have discovered. Fresh seal cap, used bottle opener from Sierra Nevada. Northern Hemisphere Harvest 2012, wet hop ale. Sierra Nevada, purest ingredients, finest quality. Northern Hemisphere Harvest. Interesting claim that. Each fall, hops reach their peak flavour, bursting with aromatic oils that give ales layers of complex flavour and aroma that can only happen at harvest time. For us, fall comes twice a year. Once in each hemisphere, we have poetry. This harvest ale features, quote, wet, unquote, or undried whole cone hops from Yakima, West Australia, that are plucked from the vine and delivered to our brewery within 24 hours of picking. Brewed and bottled by Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, Chico, California. Our Northern Hemisphere Harvest Ale was the first American beer ever brewed with 100% fresh-picked wet hops. In one day we harvest hops in Yakima, West Australia, then ship them the same night to our brewery in Chico, California, and into the brew kettle at dawn the following day. This extraordinary effort creates a beer with unmatched aromatics of fresh pine, green grass and citrus, with layers of spicy, bittersweet notes that hop fanatics like us dream of all year. And it still doesn't say it's malt liquor. I'm sorry, Earl Portland. It just doesn't do it. It's 710 mils, approximately 3.8 standard drinks, 6.7% alcohol, so it should be calling itself malt liquor, but it doesn't. However, it's not the first one I've bought, even though it's twice the price per drink of my usual tipple. Here we have the tool for opening the beer. So, right now we're a couple of hours from sundown on the 24th of December 2012. Malt liquor. Now, I understand part of the traditions for making a malt liquor video is there should be some kind of a rant or a rave or a story or a spiel dispensed as the alcohol is taken on board. And part of the challenge, part of the mystique of the malt liquor video is being able to keep it together while imbibing, not to lose the plot. So we'll see how I go. I think I'd like to talk about gossip. And recently, conference report, Fred, how you going? Put up a video called Come All Ye Arseholes. And his suggestion was that the word ye should basically become synonymous with arsehole or shithead. And he thought it could be used for those occasions when one surfs the YouTube comments threads and discovers that a couple of people are discussing oneself as if one wasn't able to read their comments, but of course because it's a thread one is able to read the comments. And Fred said that when this happened he found it quite disturbing, as if he was being stabbed in the back and gossiped about. And people who he thought he was friends with were saying things that he found derogatory or disrespectful or perhaps even defamatory. And it occurred to me that this is perhaps an interpretation of the word gossip that is peculiar to the British people and perhaps the English in particular. I mentioned to Fred on his comment thread that I've only met one other individual who takes such a preemptively harsh view of anything that might possibly be called gossip as the view that he espoused. And that other person is in fact about, similar in age as Fred and also English. So I'm wondering whether maybe it's part of the culture of the 50-ish British educated classes that gossip is automatically, universally expected to be bad, and that anybody who's talking about you behind your back is automatically per se gossiping, and therefore it must be bad, and thus and because one should automatically get cranky about it. And if that is the case with British culture, I suspect it's a downstream consequence of their towns and cities being so big. In Australia, 10,000 people and you're a sizeable town. 25,000 people or a cathedral and you call yourself a city. In England, 10 or 15,000 people is a village. And one of the things I've noticed by living around here, and here's a good line shoot, by living around here since 1882, when me father's grandfather brought the family DNA to the district, at least that's on the white side. On the black side, the ranking Aboriginal tribal male elder has told me that he reckons he went to school with some Aboriginals with my last family name. And he's trying to claim me as a blackfella, whereas I think my mother's father might have had a bit Aborigine in him. So maybe I've been living here for closer to 40,000 years than 130 or so. But just going on the white fella side of it, on my father's grandfather being here since 1882, there's what we call old local effect. An old local effect means that when you hear a bit of news or gossip about any individual that is considered to be a local, and you get to be a local more or less by attending the local kindergarten. If you go to kindergarten, that's when all the little children form their cliques. The sheep farmers' kids hang around together in a bunch. The cow farmers' kids hang around together in a bunch. The people whose parents are shop assistants, they all hang around together in a bunch. The people who live in rented houses, their kids hang around together in a bunch. People who have professional qualifications, they'll hang around together in a bunch. People whose children have gone to university, people who've gone to university, their kids will hang around together in a bunch. I noticed it because my kids started hanging around the other alternate lifestyle people's children. Within 6 months of going to kindergarten, they'd already streamed themselves. But the point is, if somebody comes to the district any time after kindergarten, the children who were in kindergarten, who regard themselves as the locals, year of whatever they started kindergarten, they see any newcomer as an outsider. And if you want to be an established local, then your parents went to the same kindergarten. An old local, it's your grandparents who went to that kindergarten. If you want to be an original settler, then your family is living on land which your ancestors got the original title deeds from the colonial governor before Federation. And these nesting sets of locals have greater and lesser degrees of connection. And I noticed that the people we call floaties, the people who float into town and stay for a couple of years and try very hard to pretend that they're a big noise in the community, and then for some reason they decide that it's going to make them more money if they sell up and go somewhere else and they float out again. Once upon a time they would have been classed as school teachers, bank employees, police, government research department employees. Anybody who had professional qualifications and a government job and they could be expected to come to town for a year or two and then go away, they're called floaties. And the floaties would quite often behave as if they felt unfairly locked out because they didn't get a lot of jokes, they didn't understand a lot of comments. And they always talk as if anybody who is plugged into the old local effect and gets the point of a lot of the gossip, the floaties like to think the old locals are retarded, hillbilly dumbass hicks. But another way of looking at it is we're genetically engineered to be good at living here. When we were little and impressionable, we heard our parents and maybe our grandparents telling and retelling stories of prominent individuals and how they behaved and what they'd done and what their parents had done and what their kids had done and how they could be expected to behave in the future. And it cuts two ways. On the one hand, you'll find some people who they're pushing shit up a hill because they come from a domestic suburban shithole or a domestic rural shithole, and everybody who knows what their parents and grandparents were like understands what sort of standards, codes of moral behaviour they've had around them as little children, what they've role modelled on. And on the one hand, they may be expected to behave no better than they've been brought up, so they may not be given a big break too early, but on the other hand, they will be given a chance, and if they don't fuck it up, the fact that they've done a good job of learning to behave in a socially acceptable manner despite the shitty ancestry, that gives them about twice or three times the goody points, socially speaking, as somebody who's come from a good background who is performing at the same level of social acceptability. If you've been raised to be a dickhead and you don't behave like a dickhead, everybody notices in a little town. Not saying they're not going to keep an eye on you and half expect you're going to fuck up, but if you are doing well, the rewards are showered on your head because everybody wants to see you keep on the right track. Likewise, if somebody who's had a shitty start in life, been beaten up by a drunken father after their mother's died in childbirth or something, if and when they get caught stealing from their boss and they go to jail for fraud, everybody kind of understands. Oh, well, you know, they never had much of a chance, did they? Or if somebody's grandfather was a good bloke, pillar of the community, in public, and a drunken, violent arsehole in private, and if the grandfather beats the father and if the father drinks the farm, then the alcoholic rolling around in a puddle of vomit in the park is tolerated a lot better by people who understand the history that's gone before and how it's come to be so and why that individual just can't shake it off. And that's all gossip, isn't it? It's networking, it's local history, it's being genetically engineered and bred to live where you actually fucking do live. The Aborigines say anybody who's born in Australia has an Aboriginal soul. I suspect that 7 generations of living in one area and one's DNA being made from local water and local amino acids and proteins for 7 generations, one resonates with the landscape. And part of the problem with white civilization is that 7 times every generation, they fucking move. So they don't actually plug in and fit into the life force spirit of the landscape anywhere on Earth. Because they roll around like a stone with no moss, failing to gather connections. Now, the other thing about gossip is good news as well as bad news. People share hopes and aspirations and ambitions, as well as fears and stories of dastardly deeds done dirty in the middle of the night. A way of looking at it is that if the towns or the villages or the community's gossip network cannot handle whatever human behaviour is under discussion, if it's too big for the gossip network, then guess where the next step is? The House of Follies. The House of Follies is where individuals get taken when they consistently, persistently make a fucking mess of themselves, their lifestyle and other people who are around them. The House of Follies is where you get taken so that a magistrate or a judge or a justice can scrutinise the situation, look at what society's representatives in the form of the police, the attack dogs, the prosecutors, the dog handlers, what they have to say. And then whatever the alleged perpetrator, the suspected perpetrator, the defendant against Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors and duly appointed minions, has to say about whether they did what they're accused of doing or whether they didn't do it, and if they did it, why they thought they were doing the right thing. And the magistrate, the judge or the justice in the House of Follies then determines how long it's going to be before the particular individual miscreant is entitled to make decisions about their own life again. They may be given a fine, they may be given a good behaviour bond, they may be given part-time prison work, community service orders. They may be given weekend detention, or they may be stuck inside looking at stripy sunlight for a predetermined time with perhaps good behaviour. Depending on what they're accused of, they may be stuck in there on remand for months or years waiting to be tried and then be let out when found innocent. But that's the House of Follies. That's where it all finishes up if the gossip can't deal with it. So I think it's an overreaction by the 50-ish English individuals who appear to believe that gossip is universally a bad thing. In the situation which comes to mind, I'd said about Fred that I thought he was a classical, eccentric British boffin. And he'd said on a few of his other movies and threads that he worked at a university. And I surmised that being an obvious eccentric British boffin working at a university, he tended to have a kind of an exaggerated respect for academic learning and scholastic feats of meritocracy. And I was jumped on pretty hard by another 50-ish English individual for gossiping. How is that gossiping? Using data that's been freely given in a public forum by an individual about themselves to discuss how and why I think they say some of the things that they say. Is that gossip? If so, it's a whole new definition of, or a whole new slant on gossip to me. Personally, I don't see gossip as automatically, universally a bad thing. I see gossip as sometimes exaggeratedly hopeful. This horse is going to win. This football team is going to win. I heard it from the horse's mouth. Rave, rave, rave. He's going to marry her. She's going to have a baby. That one wants to wear pink to the wedding. Gossip is how a close-knit society judges itself without calling the cops. Really, gossip is not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's something to do with the population density of industrial and post-industrial Britain, which has caused this fixation on secrecy and a deep desire to censure anybody who may be talking about one in case they say something which gets repeated, half understood, exaggerated, misrepresented in fields or circles which may cause some bad event to reflect on the person being talked about. I think it's sad that the British culture appears to have lost its respect for gossip as a force for social cohesion, and I think I'd much rather people talk about me behind my back rather than call the police on me on the suspicion that they think I might be a terrible bad person. I think that they should go and talk with other people who know me better than they do to decide whether whatever bad thing they think I might have done is likely in light of my previous demonstrations of character. That's just how I look at gossip. I can't stop people doing it. Sometimes when I hear people are saying things that I know are untrue about me, some of those times I'll go out there and jump up and down and foam at the mouth and ring people up and say, have you heard that I'm supposed to have done thus and such? If they have heard and I disagree with the proposition, I'll explain my point of view if they will allow me to. But generally, the easiest thing to do with gossip about oneself, which one considers to be untrue, is to hold your little head up high and soldier on regardless and tell the truth to anybody who asks you. The answer is not to say, oh, it's gossip, everybody who gossips is an arsehole. Such a reaction, under the lights of old local effect, generally causes people who pay attention to think, well, it's only the truth that hurts. So the more of the shindig people put up whinging and whining and moaning and groaning about gossip, the more likely it is that there's a grain of truth in the gossip they are complaining about. You know, you get into Shakespearean, methinks thou doth protest too much, the guilty flee where none pursue. So, there you go. 20 minutes, 3.8 standard drinks. Gossip is not so horrible bad, especially if it keeps you out of the House of Follies. And I know, I've spent years stuffing around in the House of Follies. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Malt liquor video. Ciao.